What's going on about this Afro think tank? Highly intelligent, beautiful black woman from Atlanta has created a theory. It's called the cookout theory. It is excellent. I'm talking, it's excellent. And I need all of you guys to hear it because it makes so much sense. And I don't want to ruin it. I want you to hear the cookout theory from her mouth. And she wrote it down. She got like she's showing you, right? And you're going to see that one of our biggest problems in the black community, right? And when I say the black community, I mean all Africans, is that we are so welcoming. We're so human, right? We allow others because we understand culture and the significance of it. And we have the oldest culture. And we understand that people enjoy our culture. That people, when they see our culture, they're attracted to it. And they want to participate. And we, being the humans that we are, we naively, right? We're very black people, we are super naive. We are super naive and we are super gullible. And our coping ability is entirely too high, meaning we cope and tolerate way too much. Just because we have the ability to cope and tolerate doesn't mean we should be coping and tolerating the stuff that we cope and tolerate. You understand? Because we have the full capability of removing weeds from our garden, if you understand what I mean. We have all the capabilities of removing weeds from our garden, but yet we allow the weeds to thrive because we want the weeds and the rest of the plants to get along. We look at the weed and we say, you can be a part of this ecosystem, if you understand what I mean. Not realizing that that weed is going to suck the life out of the plants that you planted, right? So we kind of have to start trimming the weeds, if you know what I mean, and not allowing people who are not going to add to the garden to participate in the growth of the garden, if you understand what I mean, right? But without further ado, I want you to pay attention to this intelligent and beautiful, might I add, woman speak on the cookout theory. Anyway, you guys tell me what you think in the comment section. It's Afro Think Tank. Learn some, teach some. I'm out.
As an Atlanta native, I've been trying to think of a way to explain what's happening to the city, and I think I did it. As a filmmaker, I spend a lot of time studying systems, people, and stories, and Atlanta is one that's really, really dear to my heart. I think we hear a lot of conversations about Atlanta not being a real place or what happened to the old Atlanta, but we're not having nearly enough conversations about how we got to where we are today. Which is why I created the cookout theory. So the cookout theory argues that Atlanta works as an intentional cultural ecosystem. And yes, this ecosystem is accessible to everyone. However, if you are not operating under the 4 cookout principles, then it changes the trajectory, purpose, and impact of the cookout as a whole. Meaning, when you attempt to change the infrastructure and the culture of a city that made it enticing to begin with, you ultimately are deciding to lose the enchantment of the city that made people want to move here. So let's break it down. Every cookout starts with these core elements: mutual recognition, shared contribution, relational trust, or cultural stewardship. So within these elements poses these 4 questions. Who invited you? Familiarity or relational trust? Who you with, which is your proximity or your entry point? How do you know them? Trust, status and intention, or cultural positioning? And lastly, what did you bring? Contribution and or cultural input. So as a Black community, we know those 4 elements are essential in every cookout. You not coming into Big Mama's house, not introducing yourself, don't nobody know you, and you didn't bring nothing. A cookout has never just been food, music, and family. It is a system, it is rules, it's culture, and it's order. And we have to understand in those 4 elements what the real question is. Proximity. How did you get here and who brought you? Status, what do you represent and what energy are you bringing to the space? Familiarity being, do you actually understand the impact of the culture you're stepping into? Do you understand whose house that you're walking into, and do you understand the history? And most importantly, contribution. What are you bringing to keep this thing going? Everyone who can't participate in bringing food, people bring chairs, they bring music, they bring something, and that is how Atlanta used to function. All of those same questions apply to the socioculture here in Atlanta, but here's where things get a little tricky. Atlanta's current issue isn't just social, it is very structural and it is very intentional. Let's be sure we're keeping in mind Atlanta is a black city, white state. So, redlining and the alleged taming of black people and black expressions is not nothing new to the city of Atlanta. It's just something we've never normalized. And with the World Cup coming, Atlanta is becoming more and more global and less familiar. But let's break down why. So, the cookout theory argues that Atlanta operates as its own socio-cultural ecosystem, but there are four critical events that have all played a role into the changes we see in Atlanta. Let's go chronologically. The first major event, the 1996 Olympics, 2005 Hurricane Katrina, 2008 economic recession, and lastly, 2020 COVID pandemic. So within the 96 Olympics, you have the criminalization of poverty and homelessness, the expansion of over-policing, specifically the Red Dog Unit. You also had new investors and developments. The success of the 1996 Olympics was determined on the expansion of Turner Field, the Georgia Aquarium decision, and Georgia Tech becoming a hub of wealth and elitism in the city of Atlanta. This is also the early stages of the Black Mecca branding that we see throughout the city of Atlanta, and it was the beginning of normalizing a broken infrastructure. We may have known the city could not sustain all of this, but as long as we did it in a manner that kept the city alive, we were going to figure it out. You know how recently we got brand new MARTA buses, all of these new developments, all of these new technological advances to make the city more accessible? Much like the 1996 Olympics, those upgrades are not made for the people in Atlanta. They are made for the people coming to Atlanta, which is why now residents who have relied on MARTA for the last 30 years can't even pay for MARTA to get on the bus because it's not money, it's accessibility. They want to be able to make MARTA a tourism transportation option and leave no option for citizens of Atlanta. And respectfully, yeah, you have an option, but people who are elderly and people who are handicapped are not going to be able to easily or quickly assimilate to a new payment system and a new route system within 2 months. Next, Hurricane Katrina, or as I like to call her, that trick-ass bitch. Hurricane Katrina brought mass relocation of displaced populations to Atlanta, rapid culture blending because we got the effects of Mississippi, Texas, and New Orleans all at once, economic stratification within the Black communities, emergence of class-based social tension, and the redefinition of community familiarity. The way I watched the older generation act during Hurricane Katrina, y'all should be ashamed of yourselves. Georgia had already made a very public committing to offering aid to the people who had survived Hurricane Katrina. But remember, white state, black city. So when all of these families who were willing to open up their home got a busload of black families to their front door, suddenly people got cold feet. And it was up to the black churches, nonprofit organizations, and small businesses within the Atlanta city limits to be able to render the aid that we had committed to. Me personally, the problem became this was the first time I had ever seen black people with newly acquired wealth and success use it against other black people who had just survived a major tragedy. And as much as we want to talk about how the city changed after Hurricane Katrina, we never talk about our role in making people feel unwelcome and unsafe. Within our own community in Atlanta, we had to witness the restructuring of displaced communities from states away. Speaking of survival, it brings us to our next event, the 2008 economic recession. So within this, we look at a financial reconstruction period affecting Atlanta's middle class, increased survival entrepreneurship, economic disparities, accelerated adaptation to culture, and what I call the "my president is black" era. Now, we may have heard the screams and whispers of the economic collapse. However, in a city like Atlanta, survival entrepreneurship has always been a thing. While people were losing homes, jobs, money, it was just another day at the cookout for us. We might have had limited space, but we still had the vibe going. During this time, despite the economic collapse, we always knew someone with a hair salon, a small business, a barber shop, an auto shop, because that is what the core of Atlanta's black business has always been. When they exclude you or when there are no more resources, you make them. During this time, ironically, with a black president in office, we began to see another rise in over-policing of young people in Atlanta. Clayton County PD had no business being as active in the schools as they were. There was nothing normal about locking up 13-year-olds. But it was all preparation for our last and final event, the 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. The 2020 COVID-19 pandemic. So we know within this major event, it brought job loss, mass migration of almost 2.3 million people, financial instability, but simultaneously, due to those survival entrepreneurship again, we saw a new level of financial access through PPP loans, SBA loans, and small business grants. However, during this time, we also had heightened social and racial tensions with the murder of George Floyd. Y'all remember when we tore the city up? So what all of these developers decided is we're going to create insurable chaos. Essentially, they decided to let the system and the cultural system of Atlanta implode on itself. And after we tore the city up, they would just rebuild it without a soul, without a culture, and without the input from the people that made people want to move to Atlanta in the first place. So essentially, during all of the chaos that went on during the George Floyd protests, these developers decided, let the city implode on itself. Let them tear it up. We'll come in and rebuild Atlanta. It just won't be Atlanta anymore. This decision was made with no consideration for the infrastructure, no consideration for the culture, and ultimately no consideration for whether or not Atlanta could sustain these type of developments. Despite witnessing poor infrastructure and heinous redlining, everyone still wants to come to the cookout, but nobody wants to bring anything. Nobody wants to respect the culture that was already existing here. You say Atlanta's not a real place, but you don't go where people from Atlanta go. The areas where we couldn't get outsiders to come and shop small businesses are suddenly increasing in value. And now with a global event like the World Cup, they're trying to reintroduce Atlanta to the world. But the thriving black culture that was once here isn't gone. You're building on top of it. People will come to benefit from the city and contribute nothing back to it. People have always been welcome in Atlanta. It is the core of who we are. But respect what was built before you got here. Contribute to the community. Learn the history and ask yourself, were you invited to the cookout? Did you just show up? Did you bring something or did you take away? Did you preserve it or did you help change it? That's my little cookout theory, y'all. I will be publishing this in a full synopsis breakdown on my page. So be sure that y'all like this video, comment. I would love to hear everybody's Discord, but love you, Atlanta. Y'all, please don't be mad at me. All I'm going to say is I have a major surprise for y'all off of this cookout theory. And part 2 will be posted first thing in the morning. And it has to be first thing tomorrow morning. But please, 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 make sure y'all do not miss part 2 of the cookout theory. Because I'm so excited. Y'all, please don't be mad at me. Because we are back. First of all, thank you, Atlanta and beyond, so much for the love and support and opportunities that came from that one video. That is quite literally what the core of Atlanta and the cookout theory is all about. But now let's get into it. Welcome to part 2 of the cookout theory, the fence. So remember in part 1, we discussed how Atlanta is its own cultural ecosystem, similar to a cookout, that operates off of cultural input and contribution, as well as historical acknowledgement. So if the cookout asks who is invited, then the fence would determine who is restricted. And let's make one thing clear early on. We don't own the fence. The fence determined who got protected and who was prohibited, who got access, who got displaced, and who was removed altogether. But in order to best understand the history of redlining and racial zoning in Atlanta, we got to go back to 1906. So in 1900, Atlanta experienced a huge population growth where our black population went from about 9,000 people to 35,000. In 1906, the Atlanta race riots was a violent enforcement of racial boundaries. These were the earliest establishments of racial segregation, economic intimidation, geographic containment, and restriction on mobility in the state. But we bounced back. So between 1910s and the 1920s, this was the first establishment of early reconstruction within the city of Atlanta. The Sweet Auburn district was booming by this time. The first black-owned building in Sweet Auburn was established in 1904. But because of this, we had to rebuild. And this rebuilding era brought us black-owned banks, churches, restaurants, newspapers, We understood the assignment. But in 1913, Atlanta establishes racial zoning laws as well as legal segregation. Within 1914 and 1915, we see a huge expansion of Jim Crow within Atlanta's transit systems, therefore further limiting mobility among Black residents. And in 1915, something scary happened. 1915, we get Birth of a Nation, but this is also the resurgence of the KKK on Stone Mountain. It is in no way by accident that the resurgence of the Klan comes only 2 years after racial segregation becomes legal in Georgia. 1970 and 1920, Georgia felt the effects of the Great Migration, and this means housing demand increased, racial resistance increased, but as a community, we were prioritizing community and economic independence. In 1922, Atlanta introduces new zoning plan, and these maps legally determined a white area, Black areas, or buffer areas. This is when the fence is officially built. By 1928, because of the white districts, Black districts, or buffer districts, we see a massive expansion at Georgia Tech. And in 1929, at the start of the Depression, Black communities in Atlanta were disproportionately impacted by unemployment and housing. As a community, we sometimes leave out the Great Depression because during that time, we were experiencing the Harlem Renaissance. But here in the South, the criminalization of poverty showed up in way more heinous ways. It showed up in forced labor camps, chain gangs, and forced sharecropping. And just be clear, you cannot mention the criminalization of poverty in Atlanta without mentioning the Chattahoochee Brick Company. Trifling asses. And because of those zoning laws in 1922, which distinguished a Black district, white district, or buffer district, there wasn't much option for us when it came to displacement. But through its displacement, this is where Atlanta gets its unique infrastructure when it comes to Black communities. Shotgun houses were not just about affordability. It was about proximity to your neighbors and collectively keeping one another safe. I told you we're going to always find a way. But in the middle of the Great Depression, America made a decision that would change Atlanta's entire landscape. In 1934 and 1935, the FDR administration decided to demolish Tanyard Bottoms. This was an integrated poor and middle class housing development that would eventually become Techwood Homes. In Tanyard Bottoms, Black people lived there, white people lived there, immigrants lived there, and working class Americans. And they destroyed it. In 1936, Techwood Homes is opened, America's first housing project. The demolition of Tanyard Homes displaced over 1,600 families, but Techwood Homes opened as a whites-only housing project. America's first housing project opened in Atlanta for whites only. Over 600 new white families moved in immediately. And interestingly enough, the very development that was never made for us somehow became our responsibility when developers pulled out and investors pulled out. How is something that was never made for us our responsibility to maintain? Between 1939 and 1941, we see formal housing segregation overtaking the city of Atlanta. This is around the time we get Atlanta's first Black housing projects, University Homes. But this did nothing but create concentrated poverty and government-sanctioned containment. Techwood Homes was not integrated until 1968. This is the creation of a lot of suburbs, mortgages, housing exclusions, and wealth transfer. In 1957, Governor Griffin was so against integration that he threatened school closures, state funding removal, and legal resistance. Coincidentally, it is at this time we start hearing the branding around Atlanta being a city too busy to hate. And that is because developers knew racism is not good for optics. And how could you deny it if we literally had racial maps? The goal was to not market Atlanta as a traditional Southern racist state, but instead a state with moderate intolerance but rising developments. And after Brown versus Board of Education, Atlanta public schools were not integrated until 1961 with the Atlanta 9. People love saying our schools integrated peacefully, but effective integration and peaceful integration are two different things. Most Black families in Atlanta had an understanding for where the lines were drawn. Redlining still existed, and so did housing segregation. And in southern states, our schools are tied to our neighborhoods. So if the neighborhood can remain segregated, most likely the school will too. Throughout the late 60s and 70s, we see even more result of the white flight. And in the 80s and 90s, throughout the war on drugs and more massive displacements within the city of Atlanta, developers seized an opportunity to change Atlanta's marketing altogether. And as time went on, we were included in some of these developments and decisions. Atlanta has always birthed excellence, millionaires, architects, artists. But somewhere along the way, some of us from our community confused access with liberation. But that's the pattern. At what point are we willing to swap opportunity for erasure? We started actively participating in a lot of the systems that were designed to exclude us. The acknowledgement of diluting Atlanta's culture means to also acknowledge we started building on the other side of the fence too. This is where y'all either get really, really quiet or really, really aggressive with me, and I think it's good to just keep healthy dialogue. I'm not saying one day we woke up and decided we weren't black anymore. What I am saying is there were several points at which we might not have noticed culture was being used as a weapon. When racism and redlining became distasteful, it didn't disappear. It got quieter. It got dressed up. It became urban renewal or up and coming. It became development meetings and corporate partnerships. And it became phrases like economic opportunity. Some of us were excited to go on the other side of the fence, but somebody left the damn gate open. And this is where the peach gets just a little mushy. Atlanta learned how profitable global visibility could be. Much like throughout all of our events in the cookout theory, we are now coming up on a time in which poverty and homelessness is being criminalized and our jails are filling up with our unhoused population. Our transportation systems are even being restructured. Bus routes that people have relied on for decades are now quietly disappearing, but somehow we have new buses and new trains. And these new updates are being made for tourism efficiency and accommodation, not for the efficiency and sustainability of Atlanta natives or Atlanta residents, because I know we got transplant cousins and we love y'all. And let me be very clear. I am proud of every bit of Black excellence that comes out of the city. But we can't keep restructuring ourselves for visitors when the people in the city are suffering. And now, going on the other side of the fence could mean going to the other side of the city. Because this isn't just about tourism. It's about whether or not we've learned anything. Are we really building a better city? Or are we just replacing things with prettier branding? So, did you play a role in moving the fence? Or did you leave the gate open? Be sure you all like and follow for part 3 and 4 because I have a very special announcement coming tonight. Once again, y'all, it's Big Mo. Thank you, Atlanta.
Who taught you to hate the texture of your hair? Who taught you to hate the shape of your nose? Who taught you to hate the color of your skin to such an extent that you bleach? Who taught you to hate yourself from the top of your head to the soles of your feet? Before you come asking Mr. Muhammad, does he teach hate? You should ask yourself, who taught you to hate being what God gave you?
'Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! Free Sudan! Boycott diamonds and gold! We most definitely cannot forget about the people of Sudan.
Thanks for watching Afro Think Tank. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. And follow me on Substack and Patreon for more content. Remember, it's Pan-Africanism or nothing.